I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Hello.
Hey, so good to see you.
Good to see you. How are things on the Isle of Wood and Water?
It's wonderful. It's paradise. It's coming back together.
Yay.
Slowly, going, but yes, it's coming back.
Yeah. Good. People are recovering there. I know that, you hear so much about what happens right after a storm, and then everybody forgets, the world just moves on. So how are things?
If the world is moving on, things are moving on here as well on the island. It's just not back where it was, and people are still in the middle of their struggle trying to get back to where it was. So, but people are going easy. It's like comfortable, slow, but not all of the resorts are open. There's not as many people visiting just yet, but there is a flow of people coming back to the island. Folks need jobs. Roads still need to be fixed. Still haven't gone over to the side of the island that was most devastated. Montego Bay and the area that I live in is pretty. It seems pretty normal in this way.
Gotcha. I don't know if I ever heard was there intense loss of life on the island, or was it mostly destruction of property?
Lots of destruction of property, but then also lots of loss of life. And I don't know the actual numbers of that, because it's not like I was off the island so long to not know what the local news are. But for people that were in the more remote areas, there's still disconnection there. So there's still no lights in those areas. There's still roads that are like messed up and bad. I know that the military and the law enforcement here are going to different communities to do a surveillance of what's going on. Like my really good friend who lives up in Betheltown is one area that was pretty intensely devastated. She just last week had folks from the government to come up to her neighborhood and do a surveillance. And that's just surveillance and take like note of what has happened, and not with any actual knowledge or recommendations as to like when there's going to be support for repairs. So people are still trying to like get their self together in a major way here on the island. And people are still like looking for work, because if the major resorts are not open, that's one of the main economic vehicles here.
Right.
So all of those people at the resorts don't have those jobs. So you have a lot of people that are looking for employment, and the resources to do the repairs from the actual destruction of the buildings has been slow coming, because we're in a war. So transport and all of those things that are happening, it's just taking time. People are in good spirits, which is why I love being on this island, because like the vibration doesn't change as far as how people's energy goes, but it is slow rolling, and you can feel the stress and the tension of not having the same economic platform. Not platform, that's not the word I want to use. The same type of economic viability as when there's tourism coming true.
Yeah, the stability and and here we are, getting ready to roll back into the next hurricane season. So I suppose folks on the island are used to that. I don't know. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I mean,
I also live in Florida too. So like, hurricane season and this type of weather is the thing that's like the economic cost of having beauty and living in paradise and living in places that are always tropical. And the fact that we're having like all of this new environmental destruction on.
Yeah, I know. I know. I used to live in Florida in a previous life, and it was North Florida. So,
the South. The South. North Florida is the South still.
Oh, okay. The South. Okay. Well, I have lived in the South almost my entire life. The only time that I was not in the South, we've talked about in previous episodes, was my 5 years, 6 years in Colorado for a hot minute. But yeah, I did live in the northern part of Florida on the East Coast, and I hear people talk about moving to Florida, and I'm just like, why? With climate change getting, I mean, besides all the things that are happening in Florida anyway, but with climate change getting worse, and the very high probability that you would have to evacuate at least once in every hurricane season, I'm just like, I can't. I would not. I wouldn't want to live in that. That's no offense. I know you love Florida, but I wouldn't want to live in that state. You couldn't pay me enough money to live there. But
Well,
sorry to all of our listeners or viewers in Florida, but yeah.
Florida is a very hard way to go as far as like living goes, especially because of the administration there. So I love the tropics, and that is why I choose places that are warm, and I choose places where there's water so that I can see Yamaya every morning. I choose that. But if Florida was situated differently, or if California was more cost effective, those would be places that I would consider being that give you that kind of comfort, tropical way of living.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a difference in the two of us, because I moved up north to get, away from the heat, and which I know most people are like, what is wrong with you? I mean, if I had a nickel for every time people ask me, not so much now because I've been here for a minute, but when I first moved up here, people would say, oh, where'd you move from? And I'd say Charleston, South Carolina. Like, why did you move up here from there? I just, in this latest chapter of my life, I'm just a lava blood walking around. And so being in the heat to me is just horrifically uncomfortable because I'm hot all the time. So,
you broke up with the South.
Yes, I did. We talked about other breakups last week, and and this time I broke up with the South. Yeah.
Kind of.
I'm 58 years old, and I lived there the majority of my life, except for 5 years. I was in the South in some iteration, shape, or form, and I'm very happy to be out of it for sure. I go back there to visit, and every time I leave, I'm like, how can I get out of here fast enough? So sorry to all of our listeners in the South. I know it appeals to a lot of people, but it's not appealing to me anymore.
It's the U.S. South, and in this moment, I think it's like really critical to point out that in U.S. history, and as we're talking about like this being in this year of this 250th anniversary, the South is the place where we really get the core of like, what U.S. culture looks like and feels like. I mean, and it really is the thing that speaks to how the United States goes, which is why I wanted to come back to that conversation now, because we did get some interesting comments on the conversation about the breakup with a friend. And so
we
did. And I wanted to make sure that we responded to the comments, because it's always an honor to know that our listeners are listening and that they're participating and engaged in our conversation.
Yes.
And to hear what they're thinking about. What were you going to say?
I love getting comments. I'm so excited when I see that somebody's given us any kind of feedback. And, some of the comments that we've had on past episodes have been, been a little sus. I know that sometimes people just go on in the what do we call them, keyboard warriors, where they just will say whatever, all over the place. All human decorum just goes right out the window when you're typing into an anonymous oblivion. And so yeah, some stuff has not been that kind, but yeah, we did the episode on the friend breakup, and we got some feedback on that particular show that I thought was really interesting, and I shared it with you, and I know that part of the comment, the person gave feedback about how I believe they identified as a Black woman, and they said that they had these kinds of conversations with white friends before. And what was one of the things that I thought was so interesting was she said that she never really considered how that breakup might have landed on the white person that she had broken up with. And I thought that was really, I love that she was thinking about that. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated that. And a point of the conversation, I had some additional conversations about the episode. And one of the conversations was that there's so many important things that are going on in this world right now. Why are we having a discussion about, social relationships and intimacies where people are breaking up with each other? And one of the things that was critical, I think, that in both of us having this conversation is to model what it looks like to be able to speak into something that is bothering you. That's number one. Two, the part of it is to the point of the person who did offer the comment about not being able to, or not having thought about the impact on the other person. If we can model ways of extending the way that we are thinking about our relationships and everything like that, then it is helpful. It is helpful for us to make sure that we're repairing our relationships and also healing ourselves through things. And I just want to say, just plain out, if there are a number of people that are having this type of experience where there is some type of a breakup with a friend and there is some type of an impact, and that impact is not resolved or worked through, then you have a whole lot of angry people that are walking around and not doing the good work that we need to do in this moment to be a united front. If white women are uncomfortable because they're having breakups with their Black friends, then it's less likely that they're going to want to stand on the front lines in the way that we need people to be standing on the front lines, especially when we're having our administration playing tricks on us in the way that we saw at the correspondence dinner. We all need to be kind of aligned and have our opportunity to be able to communicate with each other, to talk about our impacts with each other, to understand some of the issues and concerns that we want to work through, so that when the bigger things come up, we can work through them in a more effective way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I started thinking about when you shared that feedback with me that a person expressed to you, why are you talking about this stuff? This isn't important. There's so many other things. Yes. And I feel like we can't lose sight of the micro because we're so focused on the macro. And what I mean by that is that, I'm wearing my keffiyeh as I do every day. Palestine is always in my heart. I had a dialogue with a father that lives in Palestine that I manage fundraising campaigns for him. And after that money is raised, I send him money every week. And so he and I were communicating just before you and I got on, and he brings that connection to what's happening on the ground. He tells me how he and his family are faring, and whether or not the tent that they've been staying in is still standing based on when they had the rains and lots of storms a few months ago. Every day he was just like, the tent's barely standing. We woke up in 5 inches of water this morning, and all of those things. Yes, all of that macro stuff is happening, and the micro stuff is also still happening. And if I stay, I'll just speak about myself. If I stay focused in all that's happening out in the world, I have a really hard time, like, being where my feet are, as I used to say to my daughter all the time. And so, yeah, when you brought that up about that feedback that you got and how I feel like, I wonder if the US in particular has a hard time, and maybe other areas of the world and other cultures do as well, can't focus on more than one thing at a time, and so, yeah, that's what came up for me when you shared that feedback.
Yeah, no, I'm curious as to how many other people saw the utility in modeling how you work through something, especially thinking about when there is like a discomfort in bringing up curiosities that you might have in community people that have diverse backgrounds and experiences. Another point that was brought up, and I'm so thankful that the person who made the comment spoken to my use of Black female rather than Black woman, and why can't we use Black women? And I really wanted to speak into that comment first and foremost to say I had not even thought about the use of the language Black female. And I use that language. This is not an excuse. It's the way that I use my language and the way that I talk, because I'm writing a lot of grants. And when you're writing that and they ask you to do the data, you write Black female,
Oh, right.
So I think that is in my mind, but that's not the excuse. What was appropriate was what the person in the comment was alluding to. And when I am using that terminology in speaking and I'm saying a Black female, it does reduce it down to a very biological and lack of relationship having um,
Mm.
um, acknowledgement of being of dignity for Black women. And
Mm-hmm.
so thank you for that correction and pulling and calling me in on that, and to recognize that if we are not acknowledging Black women as women, then we don't see them as women. We see them as females. We see them as something biological. We don't see them as being able to hold the dignity or the respect that is necessary that comes along with humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to offer that correction and be thankful for the person to say, yeah, I wish we could say Black women instead of Black females. And it's important to check in with how your language is having an impact on other people, because it isn't, I don't want us to be thinking about Black women or me sitting in this conversation with you as a Black identified woman, and being reduced to anything less than that as we're on a scale of having a conversation and knowing that we're coming from diverse backgrounds in the way that we are.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for that. And
Thank
that's important. And it's also important for other people to know and think about. So, and I'm also confident enough to be able to say, yo, you're right. We have to remember it's very important to help remind other people through the language choices that we make. And if there is an impact, for somebody to be able to comfortably communicate that impact and me not take that as an affront or anything, but be
you.
like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is something I wasn't thinking about, and let me speak into why it's important to acknowledge the comment and acknowledge why the change is important. And it doesn't hurt me to make that change. It actually elevates Black womanhood, and the dignity that we hold amongst each other as we're in communication. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you, and I'm really appreciating your responsiveness to that. And I'm also wondering to myself, because in all of our conversations, I've heard you use Black female before, or white female, or, a female male as instead of woman and man. And I gotta say, I probably have had a reaction to it. And
Mm,
so I'm curious about why I never said
mm,
anything about it. And I think I so that's the first thing that's coming up for me. And I'm wondering if this is kind of to that episode when when I was talking about labor, and when you were asking me, did you give her any feedback about how this landed on you or how it felt to you? And I said no, because I felt like that would be asking for more labor, and I didn't want to do that. And I think if I were to make a determination right now, I think that I haven't given you any kind of feedback on using female and male instead of woman and man, because you are a Black woman, and because, especially if you're speaking about Black females, I'm like, I'm not going to correct you on that. That's not me. And even to that point, when I saw this comment and
mhm.
I saw she spoke into, why is she saying Black female instead of Black women? And I even told you before we got on here, I wasn't gonna respond to that, because that's not my place to respond. It's, the comment was aimed at you, and I wasn't gonna get in between two Black women talking about something. And so I'm wondering if that has anything to do with why I haven't said, or given you any kind of feedback or spoken into, because I do bristle at that, especially when men do it, white men in particular. But I've also seen Black men do it as well, using female instead of woman, especially or using girl instead of woman, the broad lexicon of calling all of us girls, but there's a distinction between boys and men. That's always, because that feels infantilizing, and it always feels reductionist to me. But I also wonder if some part of it is the fact that female and male speaks into the binary that we're all learning is more fluid than than maybe the societal teachings would dictate. And so, the word woman to me, and even the word man versus male, feels more inclusive, maybe, of a broader spectrum outside of the binary. That's something that popped into my head while I was listening to your responsiveness. And And so maybe that's why I bristle at it instead of, but yeah, anytime a man calls any kind of uses female instead of woman, it always pisses me off because it feels reductionist. It feels like,
Yeah.
it's like that. It's like, husband and I now pronounce you man and wife. And now we mostly hear husband and wife if it's at a heterosexual wedding, but the man and wife thing always pissed me off because it's like, oh, he's a man, but she's not a woman anymore. Now she's a wife, and so I don't know. Those are just the things that came up in my mind.
Though.
Yeah,
I would offer that there is a distinction between woman and wife and all that.
Oh yeah. I'm just saying,
sure.
These are just the different, the different iterations of that space that comes up in my head, and I feel I have a responsiveness to it when I hear it. So yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm highlighting out of that is the comfortability on when it is that you offer a curiosity about why is it that you're using a word choice, and also communicating what the impact of that word choice is on people. And this is something that I have encountered in a number of different ways throughout my life. One, culturally being in a different place than the US, or whenever you travel and you say something, and you do have to check in with people like on understanding what the context of the language that you're using. And also just to think about, to your point of binary, there's a diversity of people and the way that they choose to identify themselves. And I also want to be in the respect of that. I don't have like, again, that was just the vernacular that I chose, male. And I do that for, males too. See, I'm doing it now. Now I'm checking in with myself, but I do it for males too. Cause I ascribe to most male people as penis people when I'm like in my just regular conversation with people. That's the truth, because there is a specific experience that I've had that helps me to like call that in, but I wouldn't, generalize that to people that I don't know. That's a more intimate conversation, but people need to be and want to be identified in the way that they want to be identified. And I think it's easy to honor and respect that. And so
Absolutely.
being able to do that helps us to, I want to get back to kind of the serious conversation, helps us to be able to navigate kind of what's going on in the world. These conversations on this level are important because it really speaks into valuing other human beings and human dignity. Like, it's just bottom line. And that's not what we're seeing in our world today. We're not seeing the value and having human dignity and people being allowed their dignity and being allowed the way that they want to identify. As being now told you have to identify into this specific way. And those narratives typically come out of US culture and convention and impact the entire world. And so if being people from the US, having a very clear understanding about that culture, if we are not being introspective about these conversations and this impact, so that we can also share that understanding with the world as we're also sharing these narratives that the US continues to create. And I'm saying create because we really just had this current event that happened, or this debacle at this correspondence dinner, where there was a human that ran through the security and had a whole responsiveness from law enforcement at the correspondence dinner, where shots went off, where Trump and JD Vance were rushed off of the stage, and then it lent the perfect environment for them to have this kind of post conference about how wonderful our law enforcement responded to a threat, and now the reason why we're spending all this money on increasing our surveillance and our protections. And I just found it ridiculously fascinating. I also, the language of the press conference, it actually brought me into tears, because what I was seeing, to your point earlier, is a modeling of exactly what they've done in Palestine, as far as trying to like kind of over surveil and try to like criminalize and increase government's occupation of our lives. That's the only thing I can think about the words of it. And then also, when you do that, have that over surveillance and over criminalization, you have more opportunities to put more people in jail, and then more people in jail turns us back into our slave economy, because then we know that they're doing all the thing with the convict leasing, and you lose all your rights, but you still have to produce out of those systems. And so I was really disheartened by the way that the US is still continuing to build narrative, but they're doing it so blatantly, so ridiculously, and treating us as if we would not be able to see how clearly they are setting up this kind of like debauchery of our autonomy and our rights.
Yeah. I was reading something right before we got on this recording about, in responsiveness to the supposed assassination attempt of Trump last night, or not last night, but just recently over the weekend. And they were talking about how, and I apologize to the content creator that posted this on the socials, because I didn't write down who shared it, so I don't have that ability to bring up their name and give them credit. But I thought it was a fascinating take on it, because they were in DC at a different dinner. There apparently there's another dinner that happens at the same time as the correspondence dinner, as a kind of response and rebut to more independent. So it's attended by more independent media sources and reporters and outlets than the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is now just the corporate media that's been bought by this administration's followers and donors. And so this person who was relating the story was in DC, just not very far away from where the White House Correspondents' Dinner was happening. So they were having responsiveness to what happened in the city. This is to your point of creating these narratives and these storylines and the storytelling through a manufactured, it's all manufactured consent, right? So a manufactured experience of, oh my God, the president is, somebody's tried to assassinate the president again. And they were relaying that the entire city was locked down tight. I mean, there were no roads where you could move. They shut down the entire city in responsiveness to that. There were corridors that people were allowed to move in. But first of all, they were all told they had to shelter in place in the entire city. It wasn't just in a 2-block radius of where the thing was, but it was the whole city. And then they had to shelter in place for a certain period of time. And then when they were allowed to leave, they were only allowed to go down certain streets and certain corridors, and everybody in single file line. And they had to, and this person that was relaying the story was doing it within the context of saying that this was a test, that creating the scenario, and I know you just said this, so I'm reiterating based on the words of this other person, that they created this situation so that they could see what it was like to shut down the capital of this country. And in a way to make, all of the residents of that and anybody that was within the radius of the city subject to a complete restricting of their movement and their ability to move. And so when I read that, and based on what I had already seen lots of people saying, and I said it right off the rip, as soon as I knew that it had supposedly happened, I was like, it's fake. It's all been fake. Every assassination attempt that's happened on him has been fake. Even the one where his ear got nicked, it was fake. So but then I've seen the videos of what's happening inside the room, and it's all fake. He's not even, he doesn't even respond. He
doesn't respond. The people are pretty much sitting in their chair. If somebody runs into a room and shots are popped off, and it wasn't the assailant that, from the video, it wasn't that person just ran past the guards. They didn't run past
he did shoot because one of the guards got shot. I mean, he had a vest on, so he didn't get injured, but
the guard got shot by
I believe by the person. Cole Allen is his name. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
but I mean, nobody was hurt, but he never left the lobby, right? He never got into
He never got into
where
the
the room
lobby.
was, where anybody was, right, right. And yeah,
From
did
the
you see the video of the old guy sitting there eating his dinner while people are crouched under the tables? He didn't even stop eating. It's like clearly
there was so much about that. First of all, the fact that somebody could run through that type of
security.
security in
Yeah,
the way that they ran through, the
yeah,
responsiveness in the room when a real threat happens is, there would be some type of difference than people kind of sitting at their tables like, oh, what's going on? This is so
I mean,
interesting.
yes, we're desensitized. I will grant you that. We are greatly desensitized to
So
shots happening outside of the room that we're in. But yeah, yeah,
yeah, but I mean the level of threat, and then the language that they used in the press conference afterwards. It's just
yeah.
like always like these dog whistle
Oh,
choice
yeah.
of words that are using again to dehumanize people. To the earlier part of what we were talking about during this
Right,
episode,
right.
like dehumanizing people, creating a cause for wanting to put more economy into weaponry and over surveillance and all of the things that we know they're building up through technology. And then also this kind of test run, a model of what they've already done in Palestine. And I have not been to Palestine, but I've gone through enough simulations in the US of what people have experienced there that when I hear these things, I'm like, this is literally what I've been told is the way that people who look more like me are experiencing over on that side of the world.
Yeah,
And it's disheartening to be able to step back and see it and know what the outcomes are going to be. And it's not like it wasn't written and it wasn't like laid out that this is what the plan was, but to be seeing it in real time. I keep on thinking about to the fact that this current administration ran on a platform of removing big government out of people's lives. And this is the most government that we have experienced in my lifetime thus far as censorship, as far as over
yep.
surveillance, as far as taking away supports that we pour into through paying our
Mm.
taxes on an annual basis. It's just like, and the level of kingdom that we're experiencing since our 250th inception of the creation of the United States,
Mhm.
the amount of kingship and kingdom and it's just like, what is the US becoming?
What I would almost say, what has it always been under the surface and now has become this blatant? It's the fear, the fear that they use as the core to every narrative. I mean, if we're, I think you and I are, and many others are already saying that this whole assassination attempt was fake. And it's all about fear. It's all about making people so terrified of what is possible that they believe that we will just say, yes, please, shut down all of our cities, make it impossible for us to move after dark, create curfews so that we can all stay safe in our home. I mean, the idiocy behind that thought process is so frustrating to me because and as a people in on US soil, the folks that live here in our within the boundaries of this country we have to find a way to, we have to say this is not okay. We have to be as vocal and as outwardly facing as we can be, which then circles me back to some of the feedback that we had about the breakup episode, because I think you had an interesting you had an interesting take on it, that if white people in particular can't figure out how to process our fears and our feelings around, someone that we thought we were in friendship with who doesn't know, had no longer wants to be friends with us, if we can bottle that up and don't know how to process it, and it creates these opportunities, and why we're the ones that need to be in the streets standing up to this and saying this is not okay, because we're the ones that have always experienced the level of safety above and beyond anybody that didn't look like us. So I don't know where I'm going with that. It just feels like, I know, I'm talking in circles,
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, I understand that for somebody looking outside of whiteness, losing that position of power where there's always a consistent amount of safety is a hard place to exist in, and it's a hard place to exist in. I mean, like, when the bully is back in the corner, the bully is going to lash out. And right now, the demographics of the United States are shifting, where the bully is not the majority anymore. And I'm using this term loosely. The bully is not in the majority anymore, and the bully is lashing out. And the bully has said, "This is what the plan is going to be to reinstate my position and make sure that we're doing this through the tactics that have always worked throughout history, which is creating fear, because people in fear are then in a heightened sense of existence, right? And now we have to go to the biology of it. Their amygdala is only having them make choices that are very black and white. It's very hard for you.
What is that? The reptilian brain. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's very hard for you to sit back when you are in a state of fear, other than to say yes and no, like that, because that's the choice that you're making. Your body is going to make fight or flight,
flight or freeze. Yeah.
It's a very binary way that you make decisions when you are in fear. So the tactic that they're using is a tactic that is actually brilliant and makes the most sense, because you're just going to get the yes or no. Yes, do you want safety? And this is the way that we're offering you safety. Now we're giving you more technology and giving you more law enforcement and putting our money into that, so that then we have more of the control that we want to have. And before you turn around and say, wait, this is not what we wanted, which is the state of the world today. We have, people have put this person in a position of power, with a lot of people in support in our cabinets and in our judiciary. And so because of all of that, now they're able to move forward in a plan, and we're all in a state of fear and, oh my God, and I can't believe
do. Yeah.
And all we have is the yes or no. So the tactic has been tried and true. And it is an opportunity for us to recognize the tactic, recognize the fallacy in all of these false narratives, recognize that they are creating conditions for us to want to, or to feel like we just have to follow along with whatever it is that they're offering to us.
Right.
But there is enough power in people coming together to say, no, this is not going to be acceptable. What is not sustainable for people who are raised in U.S. culture. The way that our administration is doing this is not sustainable. Even though this is being pushed forward, taking away people who are used to having freedom and right, taking away their freedom and right is not sustainable. It's not going to work. Attacking people who don't recognize your position of power, in the case of Iran and stuff like that, it's not going to work. So what worked for the bullies in the past, because there's more communication, because there's more technology, because there's more truth beyond these fake narratives that they're pushing, this is not a sustainable model for what we exist in today.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this conversation, and I appreciate the responsiveness that folks have come into our comments section on YouTube and have shared with us how whatever they've heard on any given episode has impacted them. And I want to take just a quick moment to say to folks, because we actually have, it's interesting because we do an audio version of this that goes on all of the platforms that people get their audio podcasts from, Apple Podcasts and Podbean and Spotify, which we're not supposed to be doing that anymore. And but they can't do comments. They can't comment in those platforms. And so I want to invite people who like to listen to and if they have access. So, it's very interesting. We have a very different, just talking about our listenership, we have a very different look to our listenership on the audio platforms than we do in YouTube. we have over 55 countries represented of people that are listening to our podcast on the audio platforms. Yay! Shout out to everybody that is out there that listens. We got a lot from Vietnam just last month. We got in one day. It just exploded. So anyway, I love looking at our statistics on the audio platforms and seeing which countries, what new countries have we gotten folks from today. But then the YouTube is a little bit different. It's moving differently. It was all USian in the beginning, and now we're starting to get some more countries kind of involved. But I want to invite people who might be listening to us on an audio platform that if you have access to YouTube, you can listen if you prefer to listen and not watch. I don't know why you wouldn't want to see our beautiful faces, but if you prefer to listen, you can listen on YouTube. You can, there's an audio version that feeds directly to our YouTube as well. So the great thing about it is that you can comment on what you hear, what you liked, what you didn't like. If you have any questions for us, that's all wonderful. So I encourage anybody that listens to us on the other platforms to come and check us out on YouTube, because they'll have the opportunity to interact with us and to share comments, because we love hearing from our listeners and our viewers and getting feedback and being able to communicate with you. So, but just to let you know, if you are not familiar with how YouTube works, if you subscribe to our channel, which I highly recommend you do, you also,
Let's get some more subscribers and a little more.
Yes, we need more subscribers. We hit one level and one platform, but we want more. But also too, once you subscribe, there's like a little bell under the subscription button or right next to it. And if you click on that, you can set your notifications to get alerts every time we have a new upload. If we go live or that kind of thing, you'll get a notification. So I encourage you all to do both of those things: subscribe and click that notifications bell, and make sure you get all of our notifications of when we are on and when we upload new episodes. And please leave a comment. We would love to hear, because we really appreciate that person that came in and let us know what their feedback was on last week's episode. So
want to hear from you, because it makes our conversation so much more robust.
It does. It really does. It really does.
We do.
All right. Well, thank you, my friends. We'll see you next week.
All right.
Why do I give a fuck?
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.